What's up, guys? Welcome to snowy Northern California, and welcome to a three-way comparison video I've been waiting to do for a very long time. But first of all, I mean, how cool is this? I haven't seen snow in Northern California in the 11 years I've lived here. Should make this road a little bit more fun and interesting today as well. But back to the comparison, we are comparing the new manual Toyota GR Supra against two of the best driver's cars from the last 6 or 7 years. We have this 2018 Porsche 718 Cayman GTS, as well as a 2018 BMW M2. All three of these cars have manual transmissions, rear-wheel drive with limited slip differentials. They offer a good blend of daily usability, tech, and comfort, along with the thrilling driving dynamics. And they're also priced on the market today at quite different price points. A used first-generation non-competition M2 you can find for around $35,000 to $40,000 in great condition. The new manual GR Supra that we have today has an MSRP with options and destination of around $58,000. And this Cayman GTS, when new, was a little over $90,000. And while it has depreciated just a tad, it is still definitely the most expensive car here. So the question is, which one provides the best driving experience for the money? We're starting with the Cayman because I'm the most familiar with this car. I reviewed this exact car a couple of months ago, and the owner, Bjorn, has been nice enough to give me another go. It has the 2.5 liter turbocharged Boxer 4-cylinder engine, which makes 365 horsepower and 309 pound-feet. It has the PASM adaptive sport suspension, a limited slip rear differential, electric power steering, and this car weighs in at just over 3,000 pounds. In theory, this should be by far the most focused sports car here, but let's see if that's actually the case. Boxer 4-cylinder engine. I do definitely miss the 6-cylinder howl of the former 981 generation Cayman, as well as the later 718 4-liter Cayman. So let's flip this thing over into Sport Plus. It opens up the valved exhaust. We're going to turn the dampers back into the softer setting. It is actually snowing pretty hard now. Not the best road conditions, but thankfully we're on a set of Michelin PS4S tires, which are excellent in the rain. Wow, this road is not conducive to aggressive driving today. We'll just have to make do. This car is handling it really well though. Mid-engine balance, good traction with the weight of that Boxer 4 over the rear axle. Listen to that. Doesn't make an inspiring sound, but still better than any Subaru engine, I would say. Super easy to heel-toe downshift. Really great throttle response from this Boxer 4. Doesn't feel heavily turbocharged in that regard. Good steering feel from this electric power steering rack. Not a ton of feedback, but really good for an E-Pass, and good weighting. Very precise, very accurate. You can really just place the front end of this car exactly where you want. And the car feels light. I think that might be the key differentiating factor between this and the M2 and the Supra. This car is just so much lighter, 3,000 pounds. Coupled with that mid-engine balance, it's going to be a tough package to beat. Woo! The way it hooks up, even in these conditions, is very admirable. Wow. This manual transmission feels really good as well. Slots into gate with a positive feeling. It is a little bit floppy in a sense. There's a little bit of lateral slop, and I wish it wasn't quite so light. I would like a little bit more effort, but overall it still fits the personality of this car really well. It's a very engaging car to drive. while also being very confidence inspiring. It doesn't feel like a car that wants to bite you. It's very driver friendly out here in the canyons. Woo, traction limited there. Low grip surface today, that's for sure. But this car is handling it really well. I'd be shocked if the M2 and Supra were able to put the power down even half as well. This really is a very impressive driving machine, even though it has an MSRP of over $90,000, which might seem like a bit of a stretch for a car that only makes 365 horsepower from a 4-cylinder engine. But I would challenge you to get behind the wheel of one before you jump to any conclusions. This absolutely feels like a $90,000+ driving experience, if not a 6-figure driving experience. Not necessarily in the speeds it can carry on the straights, but just the sheer attention to overall balance. The chassis is just sublime. You feel everything that the car is doing. The brake pedal is nice and firm and linear. This engine is so flexible at all RPMs as well. The turbo lag really is barely discernible as long as you keep the RPMs high. Such a good car, the 718 chassis. This manual transmission does have long gearing, but because the torque curve is just so broad, it's not that big of an issue. You still have plenty of straight line performance. What a high benchmark to set for the other two cars. If the M2 and Supra can even feel 80% as good as this on a canyon road, then I would absolutely consider them to be performance car bargains. But that's enough of the GTS. Just a quick little reminder of what an amazing car this is. Even better in GTS 4.0 form. Obviously that car commands a much higher asking price in 2023. Now let's hop into the M2, the base M2 non-competition, and see if the baby M car can even get close to this Porsche Cayman GTS. All right, we're now in the 2018 BMW M2 manual non-competition, as 2019 is a model year where the comp replaced the base model. What that means is we have the BMW N55 engine, the same one that you can find in a run-of-the-mill 335i, for example. The engine has a single twin-scroll turbo, but it's been heavily tweaked to produce 365 horsepower and 343 pound-feet of torque. Identical horsepower number, by the way, to the Cayman GTS. This car is a bit of a chunky monkey. It weighs 3,450 pounds, so at least 400 pounds heavier than the Cayman GTS. And right away, just sitting in the cockpit with a seat as low as it'll go, I feel like I'm sitting just much higher up. Center of gravity in this car is definitely much higher than it is in the Cayman, and it feels like a much less purpose-built machine. Now, let's see how this thing performs. Nice aggressive sound on startup there from this N55, even though it's not a full M-car engine. We'll put this thing into sport mode, traction and stability control off. But right away, classic BMW rubbery manual transmission. It's very easy to operate, but it just has that loosey-goosey rubber band feel to it. Whoa. Very traction limited. Surge of torque in the mid-range, revs out to around 7,000 RPM. This kind of road condition does not suit the M2. It's a very traction limited car to begin with, even with these Michelin tires, which are very good in the rain. This is a totally different experience from that Cayman GTS. The GTS, while I wasn't able to carry full speed through corners, I would say I was at least at 70 to 80% of my normal speed. But in this car, I feel like I have to cut everything back to 50% at most. Might have to use more third gear than second through some of these tighter corners. Actually, screw it, let's just use second. Spins right through second gear going uphill. Let's see how it does from a first gear roll. right, finally hooked up towards the top of second gear. This engine, the N55, kind of what it's known for. Its bread and butter is just giving you a broad torque curve. It's not a very peaky engine, doesn't really reward you for winding it all the way out to its 7,000 red line. Easy to heel toe, good pedal placement. Wow, this car's just so lively. Okay, hello there, Mr. Cows. This is the first time this has happened. Do you think I might be able to get by? Right around a blind corner too. Not the safest thing to do, Mr. Cows. Snow and cows. There's a first time for everything, I guess. Fourth gear, down into third. Good throttle response. Down into second. Whoa! This engine's pretty quiet as well. Kind of hard to tell what it's doing. You can't hear it. Very snappy car at the limit. You really have to be real quick with your hands. Huh. Not a super inspiring sound at high RPM. This N55 doesn't feel like an M-car engine because it isn't really an M-car engine. It's just a heavily tweaked N55. Woo. And even those downshifts, I can barely hear what's going on. I feel like it needs like an intake, maybe an exhaust as well. I can carry good speeds through the corner, but coming out of the corner, I have to be really, really careful with my right foot. Decent brake pedal feel at least, diving into corners. Woo, just spun right through second there. Oh my goodness. This thing is a little hooligan of a car. It feels more like a German muscle car, whereas that Cayman GTS feels like a German sports car, built from the ground up to be a corner carving machine, whereas the M2, you can tell it's based on the normal BMW 2 Series, a subcompact, sporty-ish everyday driver. And while BMW has done a great job at making the M2 feel special compared to that base 2 Series, compared to the Cayman GTS, this is just nowhere near as focused. There we go. It's a little tire shredding machine, this M2. But that's part of what gives it its charm, isn't it? A lot of people buy BMW M cars not necessarily for the lap time, not necessarily for the poise with which they attack corners, but rather for that sort of muscle car vibe. The fact that it doesn't have that much rear grip makes it a really fun and engaging car to drive. Especially on a lower grip surface, this car requires a much higher level of concentration from the driver. And that's what makes it so fun. But that said, for me, Cayman GTS all day. I mean, it's at least double the price in today's market, but I would say it's worth the money. It feels so much more balanced compared to the M2. But if a hooligan is what you want to be, the BMW M2 in that $35,000 to $40,000 range might just be one of the most fun cars you can buy. With that said, it's finally time to hop into the new GR Supra 3.0 Premium Manual and see how it stacks up between these two German machines. All right, last but not least, the new 2023 GR Supra 3.0 Premium with the manual transmission. We've been waiting for this car for so long to have the manual, and it's finally time to find out if this thing really lives up to the hype. Is the manual transmission an afterthought, or does it really work well with the rest of the car? The MSRP of this car starts at around $55,000, but with the driver assistance package and this beautiful stratosphere paint plus destination, this car comes out to right over 58 grand. That puts it right in between the $35,000 to $40,000 M2 and the $75,000 to $80,000 GTS. Of course, it's powered by the BMW B58 engine, So similar to the N55 in the M2, 3-liter inline-6 with a single twin-scroll turbo. This one puts out 382 horsepower and 368 pound-feet of torque. With the manual transmission, this car weighs just over 3,300 pounds, so right in between the M2 and the GTS. Electric power steering and front McPherson strut suspension like the other two cars. Now, first thing I'm noticing after hopping from the M2 into the Supra is that this feels actually a lot more purpose-built. I'm sitting a lot lower to the ground and relative to the dash. The cockpit is a lot cozier. So with that out of the way, let's fire this thing up. Nice aggressive startup sound. We do have some driving modes here. And the nice thing is this sport button you can actually customize similar to a BMW M button, the way I have it currently set up. Damping in normal, steering in sport, and engine in sport. And we have the gear shift assistant or auto rev match turned off. Because we drove the Cayman in the normal suspension setting, we're gonna do the same for the Supra. The M2 has non-adaptive dampers, so only a single suspension setting. Electronic parking brake, pet peeve of mine. First things first, this manual transmission. I'll just get it out of the way for you guys. This is the best manual transmission out of the three we have here today, by far. And I'll tell you why. The M2 transmission, it works fine. You can shift it quickly, but it's got that classic BMW rubbery feel with long throws. Just not a very pleasurable shifting experience. The Cayman GTS shifter is much better, but it is a little bit light and floppy. Whereas this one is tight, it's notchy, it's slick. I wouldn't call it mechanical per se, but it just, you have to be more deliberate with it, and that is just simply more enjoyable. Fast car. And right away, we're able to carry more speed and put the power down better than we were able to in the M2. This is also on Michelin Pilot Super Sport tires. Wow, the straight line performance, the broad torque curve from even 2,000 RPM, it'll pull all the way to its 7,000 RPM red line. Feels like a big, naturally aspirated engine in that regard. Just a hint of turbo lag, but very, very little. Similar to the N55, by the way. Wow, this thing feels great out here. It puts the power down. Surprisingly, I thought this thing would be an oversteering, twitchy mess out here, but no. Pretty confidence-inspiring car. Again, we have the suspension in its normal mode, and it's soaking up the bumps beautifully. All right, first gear pull. All right, in a straight line, if you give it the full beans on a damp road, it still will spin through first and second gear. But it does so in a pretty well-controlled manner. The engine doesn't make the most inspiring sound. It kind of just has a sort of synthetic tone to it throughout the rev range. It doesn't really build a crescendo or have a high-pitched note towards redline, but it's a very, very effective engine for driving quickly. Torque everywhere. The spacing of the gears, pretty good. Able to keep the engine in its power band very effectively. Just such a joy to row through the gears in this 6-speed manual. It's so good. Better than a BRZ or a GR86 manual, I would say. Good throttle response as well. Very easy to heel toe downshift. This car hooks up, man. It puts the power down no problem. Even though the Michelin Pilot Super Sports are an old tire at this point, it feels perfectly suited to the Supra. Also, clutch engagement from a dead stop. Super easy to feel. Very linear engagement. Nice progressive linear brake pedal feel as well. The inputs of this car just all work together very cohesively. That said, this e-Pass system, electric power steering, doesn't have a whole lot of feedback. It might be a little bit better than the E-Pass in the M2, but certainly not as good as in the Cayman GTS. Porsches have always been known for great steering feel, and even with the move to electric power steering, they're still at the top of the game. The steering in this Supra is a little bit numb, a little bit lifeless, but at least it's precise. You can place the front end pretty accurately. It doesn't feel like a mid-engine car in terms of the front end response when you first turn into a corner, but certainly better than the M2. Now, while we're waiting for the road to open up a little bit, interior-wise, this car feels every bit of $58,000. It feels pretty premium. It's definitely a step up from that first generation base M2. Not quite as good as the interior in the Cayman GTS, but again, you get what you pay for. The GTS was a $90,000+ car when brand new. This very much feels BMW, all the switchgear very easy to read, dedicated buttons for climate control. The iDrive system works just like it would in any BMW. But enough of that, let's finish out this drive and talk about final thoughts. Now, for canyon driving, I wish this car had a slightly lighter flywheel. I feel like between upshifts, the RPMs take a little while to fall. And so you have to be a little bit lazier with your shifting. Lively over that bump in the sport suspension mode. This car builds speed effortlessly. It feels at least as accelerative as that Boxster GTS, and definitely quicker than the M2. Oh man, this thing's good. All right, conclusion time. What do I think about these three cars? Unsurprisingly, my conclusion is you get what you pay for. And I'm not talking about original MSRP, I'm talking about what these cars cost on the market right now. The Supra, being brand new, slots right in between the other two cars, which are used. That's assuming you can get a Supra with no markup, which is a whole other story that I'm not going to go into today. But here's what I will say. From a driving dynamics standpoint, the Supra feels like a much more purposeful car than that base M2. Even before you start the engine, the seating position, everything just feels like this car was built from the ground up to be a true sports car. Not to the same extent as that Cayman GTS. The Supra does carry forth a little bit of that sort of BMW 3 Series or 2 Series vibe. The engine and interior of this car don't feel quite as focused compared to that Cayman, but definitely a couple of notches above the M2. This manual is the best manual out of these three cars, and I'm so glad that Toyota decided to make this, first of all, but second of all, not just to throw in just some ZF transmission from a BMW, but they actually tuned the shift feel in their own way to make this car stand out a little bit, and they've done a great job at that. Do you think this car is worth almost $60,000? Let me know your thoughts. A big shout out to Toyota for handing me the keys to this Supra for a week. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you have not already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.